November 3, 1944, Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Feldwebel Kurt Müller stood at the edge of the forest, studying his map in the gray morning light. 15 men under his command, all experienced soldiers, veterans of the Eastern Front, men who'd survived Stalingrad, Kursk, the long retreat across Russia. They weren't green recruits, they were professionals. Their mission was straightforward: patrol through 10 kilometers of contested forest, gather intelligence on American positions, return by nightfall. Standard reconnaissance. They'd done it dozens of times. Müller addressed his men. "Stay alert. Stay together. The Americans are somewhere in this sector. We find them, we report, we withdraw. Clear?" The men nodded, checked their weapons, adjusted their packs. Ready. Obergefreiter Hans Schmidt, Müller's second-in-command, voiced what several men were thinking. "Intelligence says the Americans have Indian scouts operating in this area. Apaches, supposedly. Should we be concerned?" Müller laughed, not mockingly, just confident. 1 Indian against 15 German soldiers? Even if we encounter him, which is unlikely, the mathematics are simple. 15 rifles, 15 experienced soldiers, 1 primitive savage with outdated training. If he's smart, he'll hide. If he's stupid, he'll die. The men laughed with him. It made sense. Superior numbers, superior training, superior discipline. What could one man do against an entire patrol? They entered the forest at 800 hours, moved in tactical formation, 5 meters spacing between soldiers, scouts forward, rear guard behind, proper military procedure, everything by the book. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that they'd been watched since before they entered the forest. That eyes had been tracking them from the moment they left their base. That the one man they dismissed as a negligible threat had been planning their capture for 3 days, had prepared the forest, had turned 10 kilometers of woodland into a trap so elaborate, so perfectly designed, that 15 experienced soldiers would walk into it without realizing until too late. The man watching them was Corporal Samuel Kaydahzinne, Chiricahua Apache, 26 years old, descended from warriors who'd evaded the entire United States Army for over a decade, in terrain far harsher than this forest. Trained since childhood in tactics that predated modern warfare by centuries. Samuel had been observing German patrol patterns for 2 weeks. Knew their routes, knew their timing, knew their procedures. And 3 days ago, when tasked with gathering intelligence on German movements, he'd made a decision. He wasn't going to observe this patrol. He was going to capture it. All of it. 15 men. Alone. His commanding officer, Captain William Bradford, had been skeptical when Samuel proposed the plan. "Corporal, you're suggesting you can capture an entire German patrol by yourself. That's 15 armed, trained soldiers. How exactly do you plan to accomplish this without it becoming a firefight?" Samuel's answer had been simple. "I'll use the forest, sir. They'll walk through it like they own it, like it's just terrain to cross. I'll show them it's alive, that it's on my side. By the time they realize what's happening, they won't be able to resist, won't want to resist. They'll surrender because fighting will seem more dangerous than surrendering." Bradford had authorized the operation, partially because Samuel had proven himself in previous missions, partially because capturing 15 Germans for interrogation was valuable, but mostly because Bradford had learned not to underestimate what Apache soldiers could do with a forest and time to prepare. Samuel had spent 3 days preparing, not building physical traps, building psychological ones, creating a maze where every path led to isolation, where the forest itself would separate the patrol, where 15 would become 1, 15 times, and 1 German soldier alone in a forest where everything seemed wrong would choose capture over the unknown. Müller's patrol moved deeper into the forest. 2 kilometers in, nothing unusual. Normal forest sounds, birds, wind through leaves. The terrain was dense but navigable, visibility good enough to maintain formation. At 3 kilometers, they found the first marker, a small cairn of stones. Unusual but not alarming. possibly a surveyor's mark. Müller noted it on his map, kept moving. At 4 kilometers, they found another cairn, this one arranged differently, almost like an arrow pointing north. Schmidt approached it, studied it. Feldwebel, this feels deliberate, like someone is marking a trail. Müller considered. Could be a trail marker, could be French resistance, could be nothing. Stay alert, watch the flanks. It's probably nothing, but maintain discipline. They continued. Found a third cairn at 5 kilometers, then a fourth. The pattern was clear now. Someone was marking a path. But who? And why? What the Germans didn't understand was that the cairns weren't markers for them. They were markers for Samuel, showing him where the patrol was, confirming they were following the route he'd predicted. Each cairn had been placed weeks ago by Samuel during his reconnaissance. The Germans thought they were navigating. They were being navigated. At 6 kilometers, the forest changed, became denser. The paths became less clear. Müller consulted his map. According to the map, there should be a clear trail here. Instead, multiple paths diverged. All looked equally viable. Müller made a decision. We split into 3 groups, 5 men each. We cover more ground, reconvene at the checkpoint in 2 hours. Radio if you encounter anything significant. It was a logical decision. Standard procedure when terrain complicated movement. But it was exactly what Samuel had been waiting for. 15 men together were difficult to capture. 5 men in 3 groups? Much easier. Samuel was positioned in a tree 200 meters ahead. Watched through binoculars as the patrol divided. Group 1 headed west. Group 2 northeast. Group 3 east. Perfect. He'd prepared for each direction. He moved through the canopy. Quiet. Fast. His grandfather had taught him to move through trees like a squirrel. Most people thought of forests as ground level. Apache warriors knew that the canopy was a highway if you knew how to use it. He reached Group 1's projected path, descended silently, waited. 5 German soldiers moved through the forest, careful, alert, led by Obergefreiter Hans Schmidt. Good soldiers, following procedure. Then Schmidt saw something ahead, a German helmet, hanging from a branch, recent, no rust, no weathering. Schmidt raised his fist. The patrol stopped. He approached the helmet carefully. It was German. Feldgrau color, standard issue. But how did it get here? Whose was it? He examined it. Found identification inside. The name made his blood run cold. It was Zimmerman's helmet. A soldier from their own company who'd gone missing 2 weeks ago on patrol. Never found. Presumed captured or killed. But why was his helmet here? Who put it here? Schmidt turned to tell his men. As he turned, he saw them. All 4 soldiers, standing motionless, hands raised. Behind each one, an American soldier with a rifle pressed to their back. Wait, no, not American soldiers, just one. One man who'd moved so fast, incapacitated all 4 before Schmidt even turned around. How? The Apache stood 20 feet away. Rifle aimed at Schmidt, voice calm, quiet. Lower your weapon, place it on the ground, hands behind your head, you are captured. Schmidt's mind raced. The other 4 were already disarmed. If he fired, the American would fire. His men would die, or the American would miss, and they'd have a firefight at close range, in this dense forest. With an enemy who'd already demonstrated impossible speed, Schmidt made a choice, lowered his rifle, placed it on the ground, raised his hands. Samuel moved forward, efficient, professional, zip-tied their hands behind their backs, gagged them, positioned them sitting against trees in a small clearing. Your patrol is divided, Samuel said in German learned during intelligence training. The others will be captured like you. Resist and people die. Surrender and everyone lives. You've already lost. Accept it. He took their radios, took their weapons, left them secured in the clearing, marked the location on his own map. Moved on. Group 2 was northeast. 4 men now. One had twisted his ankle, and the leader had sent him back to the rally point with another soldier to assist. So only 3 active soldiers in this group. Samuel reached their position. These soldiers were more nervous than the first group. The forest was too quiet. Something felt wrong. Their leader, Gefreiter Peter Hoffmann, kept looking over his shoulder. Samuel used a different tactic here. Created sound behind them, a branch breaking, loud, obvious. The 3 Germans spun, rifles up, saw movement, a shadow between trees. Hoffmann fired once. The shadow disappeared. "Did you hit it?" one soldier whispered. "I don't know. Check it." They approached carefully. Found nothing. No blood. No body. Just forest. As they searched, Samuel moved behind them. From a different direction, used a technique his grandfather taught him. Through his voice, made sound come from where he wasn't. A whistle. From the east, the Germans turned east. Samuel was west. A crack of wood. From the north, they turned north. He was south. They were spinning, confused. Where was the enemy? Then one soldier spotted something. An American soldier, standing in plain view, 50 meters away, rifle lowered, not threatening, just standing there, watching. Hoffmann aimed. "Halt, surrender." The American didn't move, just stood there. Was he surrendering? Was this a trick? Hoffmann approached. 10 steps. The American remained motionless. 20 steps. Still motionless. 30 steps. Hoffmann was almost close enough to grab him, raised his rifle. "On the ground, now!" The American wasn't real. It was uniform stuffed with leaves, propped up with branches, a decoy. Hoffmann spun. Where was the real soldier? Found him. Found Samuel standing behind his 2 companions. Rifle aimed. Both German soldiers disarmed, hands raised. "Your choice," Samuel said quietly. "Fight and die, or surrender and live. Mathematics is simple. I already have your men. You're alone. What will you do?" Hoffmann looked at his disarmed soldiers, looked at the Apache, saw calm confidence, no fear, no hesitation. This wasn't a desperate soldier getting lucky. This was a predator who'd hunted them systematically. Hoffmann lowered his weapon. "We surrender." Group 3 was the largest. 7 men, including Feldwebel Müller. They were the most difficult. But Samuel had planned for this. He didn't approach them directly. Instead, he led them, used the cairns again, adjusted a few, made them point a different direction. Müller, following the markers he'd seen earlier, assumed they were still following the same trail. They weren't. Samuel had changed the route, was leading them to a natural box canyon, a dead end surrounded by steep slopes on 3 sides. It took an hour. But eventually Müller's group walked into the canyon, realized too late it was a dead end, turned to exit, found it blocked by one Apache soldier, rifle aimed, standing at the narrow entrance, the only way out. "Feldwebel Müller," Samuel called in German. "Your patrol is captured. Groups 1 and 2 are already secured. You are surrounded. I have 15 minutes before American infantry arrives to collect prisoners. You can fight. Maybe some of you will escape. Maybe some will die. Or you can surrender now. No casualties, no shame. You were outmaneuvered. It happens." Müller stared. This was impossible. 7 men against 1. They could rush him. Some would make it past him. But Samuel wasn't alone anymore. Müller heard sounds behind him. Turned. Saw 3 American soldiers on the canyon rim above. Rifles aimed down. Samuel had called in backup for this final group. Actually, no. Müller looked closer. Not American soldiers. Dummies again. Uniforms propped up to look like soldiers. The Apache was bluffing, still alone. But Müller didn't know that. Couldn't be sure. And the risk. "How do we know our men are alive?" Müller demanded. Samuel took out a radio, keyed it. "Group 1, confirm status." Schmidt's voice came through, grim but alive. 5 prisoners, secured, unharmed. "Group 2, confirm status." Hoffmann's voice. 3 prisoners, secured, unharmed. Müller closed his eyes. His entire patrol, captured by one man. The mathematics he'd mocked this morning had been wrong. Not because of numbers, but because he'd been counting bullets and men. The Apache had been counting terrain and psychology. "We surrender," Müller said quietly. "Tell your men not to shoot. We're putting down our weapons." 7 rifles placed on the ground. 7 experienced German soldiers, hands raised, captured by one Apache who'd turned a forest into a weapon. Samuel secured them. Same procedure. Zip ties. Positioned against trees. Then he radioed his actual position to Captain Bradford. All 15 prisoners secured. No casualties on either side. Ready for collection. Bradford's response was stunned silence. Then, "Confirm. All 15? "Confirmed, sir. All 15. They walked into prepared ground. Never had a chance once they divided. Bradford arrived with a platoon 30 minutes later. Found 15 German soldiers secured in 3 locations. Found Samuel calmly waiting. Not a scratch on him. Not a shot fired. The Germans were loaded onto trucks, sent to interrogation. Müller, before being transported, asked to speak with Samuel. "How?" Müller asked simply. "How did one man capture 15? Samuel's answer was respectful. Warrior to warrior. "You fought the forest, moved through it like an obstacle. I joined the forest, became part of it, used it. Every path you took, I prepared. Every decision you made, I predicted. Not because I'm better than you, but because I've been learning this forest since I was a child. You learned warfare in schools and armies. I learned it on land that killed you if you didn't understand it. Different teachers, different lessons." Müller nodded slowly. "We underestimated you, called you primitive, thought numbers meant victory. We were fools. You weren't fools. You were confident. Confidence based on valid experience. But experience doesn't mean knowledge. You experienced European forests. I know American forests. This forest is similar enough that what works there works here. You walked into my world. In your world, maybe you win. In mine, you never had a chance." At the interrogation center, the 15 Germans provided valuable intelligence. Positions, unit strengths, supply routes. Not because they were coerced, but because they'd been defeated so completely that resistance seemed pointless. One interrogator noted in his report, "These prisoners are unusually cooperative." When asked why, they stated that after being captured by one Apache soldier without shots fired, continuing to resist seemed illogical. Their morale is not broken by cruelty, but by demonstration of such tactical superiority that further conflict feels futile. Recommend this methodology be studied and replicated where possible. Captain Bradford called Samuel into his office the next day. "Corporal, I've received word from Division. Your capture of 15 German soldiers without casualties has been noted. They want to know if this tactic can be repeated." "Can it?" Samuel considered. "Yes, sir, but requires specific conditions. Need time to prepare. Need terrain I can control. Need enemy following predictable patterns. Can't do it in open ground or cities. But in forests? With preparation time? Yes. I can capture patrols. Maybe even larger units if I have help and more time. Division wants you to train others in these methods. Can you teach what you did?" Samuel hesitated. "I can teach tactics, sir. Terrain use. Psychological manipulation. The mechanics of what I did. But the foundation, understanding forests so deeply you can predict how people move through them, that takes years. My grandfather taught me from age 6. I've been learning for 20 years. The Army wants it taught in weeks. I'll teach what I can, but some things can't be shortened." Over the following weeks, Samuel trained reconnaissance personnel in his methods. Not how to replicate exactly what he did, but how to think about terrain as a weapon, how to predict enemy movement, how to use psychology alongside tactics. The results were mixed. Some soldiers adapted well. Others couldn't grasp the mindset shift required, but even partial implementation showed results. German patrols in sectors where Samuel-trained scouts operated reported higher capture rates and lower casualties. The 15 captured Germans were eventually sent to POW camps. Most survived the war. Many were interviewed post-war about their capture. Obergefreiter Hans Schmidt's testimony in a 1946 interview. "We were professionals, veterans. We'd fought across Russia, survived the worst combat imaginable. But that Apache made us look like children, not through violence, through knowledge. He knew that forest better than we knew our own homes, knew how we'd think, where we'd go, what we'd do. We walked into his trap smiling, confident, walked out prisoners without firing a shot. It was humiliating, but also educational. We thought modern warfare made old skills obsolete. He proved that assumption wrong." Feldwebel Kurt Müller, interviewed in 1953. "I've thought about that day often, analyzed what happened, how one man defeated 15. The answer is simple but hard to accept. He was better. Not better armed, not better trained in conventional sense, but better suited to that environment. We were fish out of water. He was a shark in his ocean. Every advantage was his because he'd created the battlefield. We just walked onto it assuming it was neutral ground. It wasn't. It was his ground. We were defeated before we entered." The story of Samuel Kaydahzinne's capture of 15 Germans became a training case study. Not widely known publicly, but known to those who study unconventional warfare, small unit tactics, terrain exploitation. The lesson wasn't that one man could always defeat 15. The lesson was that when that one man controlled the environment, understood the terrain perfectly and his enemies didn't, numbers became irrelevant. 15 rifles meant nothing if those 15 men walked into positions where the rifles couldn't be used effectively. Samuel continued operating through the end of the war, participated in numerous reconnaissance missions, captured additional prisoners, though never as many as 15 at once again. The Germans learned, stopped sending patrols through forests where Apache scouts operated. Adjusted tactics, became more cautious. After the war, Samuel returned to Arizona, worked on the reservation, raised a family, spoke little about his service. When asked, his response was typically brief. "I was a scout. Used what my grandfather taught me, did my job." His grandson, Daniel Kaydahzinne, interviewed him in 1985 for a school project. The interview, recorded on cassette tape, captures one of the few times Samuel spoke in detail about the capture. Daniel: "Grandpa, you captured 15 German soldiers by yourself. How did you do it?" Samuel: "I didn't capture them by myself. The forest captured them. I just showed the forest where they were and let it do the work." Daniel: "But you planned it. You prepared the traps." Samuel: "Not traps like you think. No pits or snares or physical traps. Psychological traps. Made them see what I wanted them to see. Made them go where I wanted them to go. Made them think the forest was neutral when it was actually working against them. Your great-great-grandfather taught me. The land is alive if you know how to speak to it. I spoke to that forest. It answered. The Germans just happened to be in the way when the forest and I were talking." Daniel: "The Germans said you were better than them, that they couldn't win." Samuel: "I wasn't better. I was different. Knew different things. They knew how to fight in cities and open fields with tanks and artillery. I knew how to fight in forests with patience and planning. Put me in a city, they win. Put them in my forest, I win. That's not about better. That's about appropriate tools for appropriate situations." Daniel: "Were you scared? Facing 15 armed soldiers alone?" Samuel: "Scared? No. Careful? Yes. Fear comes from uncertainty. I'd prepared for 3 days, knew the terrain, knew their patterns. There was no uncertainty, just execution of a plan, like hunting deer. You prepare, you position yourself, you wait, you act. If you've done everything right, the deer walks to where you want it. The Germans walked to where I wanted them. Same principle. Different game." In 1990, a military historian named Dr. Robert Patterson studied unconventional tactics in World War II. His chapter on Samuel's capture of the German patrol concluded, Corporal Kaydahzinne's operation represents perfect small unit tactics. He achieved what most military theorists would consider impossible, capturing superior numbers without casualties on either side. The key was environment mastery combined with psychological manipulation. He didn't defeat 15 soldiers with force. He defeated them with knowledge. Knowledge of terrain, knowledge of human behavior, knowledge passed through generations of Apache warriors who survived by being more intelligent hunters than their prey. Modern military training focuses on technology, firepower, numbers. Kaydahzinne's success suggests that traditional knowledge, terrain reading, tracking, prediction of movement patterns, retains value that technology can't replace. He had no radio communication, no aerial support, no backup. Just knowledge. And knowledge, applied correctly, defeated 15 rifles and 15 trained soldiers. The broader lesson is humility. Modern forces must remember that primitive doesn't mean ineffective. Sometimes the oldest methods work better than the newest. Sometimes a man with centuries of ancestral knowledge poses a greater threat than a battalion with modern equipment. Context matters, terrain matters, knowledge matters. The Germans entered that forest confident. They left it prisoners, not because they were bad soldiers, but because they faced a soldier who knew something they didn't, who operated at a level their training hadn't prepared them for, who proved that in the right environment, one knowledgeable warrior could defeat 15 experienced soldiers without firing a shot. Samuel Kaydahzinne died in 1998 at age 80. His funeral was attended by family, friends, and several veterans who'd served with him. Among the attendees was a German man in his 70s, Hans Schmidt, the Obergefreiter who'd been captured that day in 1944. Schmidt had traveled from Germany specifically to pay respects. He spoke briefly at the service. I met Samuel once, for maybe 30 minutes on the worst day of my military career, the day he captured my entire patrol without violence. I was humiliated, angry, felt incompetent. But years later, I realized something. He could have killed us, could have ambushed and eliminated us. Instead, he captured us, showed us we were beaten without spilling our blood. That's not the action of a savage. That's the action of a warrior who's confident enough that he doesn't need to kill to prove superiority. He demonstrated that knowledge exceeds force, that understanding terrain and psychology can defeat numbers and weapons, that the old ways, the ways his people developed over centuries, have value that modern armies sometimes forget. I'm here today to honor a warrior who defeated me but taught me more in defeat than I learned in most victories. Thank you, Samuel, for the lesson, for the life, for the respect you showed even when we showed you none. The story of how one Apache captured 15 Germans without firing a shot remains a footnote in military history. Not widely taught, not celebrated in popular accounts, but known to those who study tactics, who understand that warfare isn't always about who has the most bullets. Sometimes it's about who understands the battlefield better. Feldwebel Müller's patrol learned that lesson the hard way, walked into a forest confident in their numbers and training, walked out prisoners captured by a man they'd dismissed as primitive, defeated not by superior force but by superior knowledge. The mathematics they'd counted that morning, 15 rifles against 1, had been wrong. Not because math itself was wrong, but because they'd been counting the wrong things. They counted weapons. Samuel counted terrain features. They counted soldiers. Samuel counted decision points. They counted bullets. Samuel counted psychological pressure points. In the end, their math gave them 15. His math gave him victory. And when 15 walked into his forest on November 3rd, 1944, all 15 walked out prisoners, captured by one Apache who'd turned mathematics itself into a weapon, who proved that sometimes 0 bullets fired wins more decisively than hundreds. The Germans said one Indian couldn't stop them. Samuel Kaydahzinne proved them wrong, not with violence, not with firepower, but with knowledge so deep, so refined over generations, that 15 armed soldiers became 15 prisoners without understanding how it happened until it was done. That's not primitive warfare. That's the most sophisticated warfare of all, where the mind is the weapon, where terrain is the ammunition, where victory comes not from killing the enemy but from making the enemy realize they've already lost. 15 Germans learned that lesson in one November day, lived to tell about it, because one Apache warrior was confident enough that he didn't need their deaths to prove his point. Their surrender was proof enough.